She was abandoned by her children and left to freeze in silence, until her Millinor sister returned with a secret that changed everything. Natalie was the sole heir to a hidden multi-million-dollar fortune. What followed was not revenge, but rebirth. From heartbreak to power, Natalie rebuilt her life. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, so you never miss stories that hit deep. Her name was Natalie Hayes, 65, mother of 3, abandoned, forgotten. This is the night everything changed. The snow fell in silent sheets, blanketing the world in white and silence. Everything was muffled, as if nature had taken a deep breath and held it. Streetlights cast warm cones of gold onto the sidewalk, illuminating nothing but empty roads and the occasional gust of wind scattering powder across the asphalt. Natalie tightened her tattered scarf around her neck. Her fingers, wrapped in thin gloves, were numb. The cold had made its home in her joints, her chest, her memory. She was 65, but tonight she felt like a forgotten shadow from another century. Someone time had no use for. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if walking too fast might tear her open. The sidewalk stretched ahead like a frozen path to nowhere. Behind her, her footprints disappeared almost as quickly as they formed, erased by the snow's relentless fall. Each step echoed in her body. Her back ached, her knees protested. Her heart, dulled by years of neglect and disappointment, beat heavily but steadily. She paused under a flickering lamppost, the yellow light making her breath look like smoke from a dying fire. Her lips trembled, not from the wind, from memory. Natalie had raised 3 children, fed them, clothed them, held them during nightmares, cheered them through every graduation, heartbreak, and fever. She had survived divorce, debt, cancer, and countless nights alone at the kitchen table, wondering how to make it all work. But the worst came later, not with shouts or slamming doors, but with absence. Quiet rejections that turned into years, missed birthdays, excuses that always sounded rehearsed, no visits, no calls, no warmth. The last message she received was a text. "Sorry, Mom, we're busy this year. Maybe next Christmas?" That was 5 years ago. Tonight, she wasn't walking to a destination. There was no invitation, no shelter. She had left her small apartment earlier, too restless to sit still, too hurt to sleep. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay still. Her eyes stung from the cold, or maybe from everything else. As she stood under the lamppost, a car turned the corner. Its headlights split the dark, then slowed. The engine purred softly, and the tires crunched to a stop near the curb. Natalie squinted. The driver's side door opened. A woman stepped out, wrapped in a crimson coat with fur trim, dark boots, and a familiar tilt of the head. "Natalie?" the woman called softly, almost unsure. Natalie's breath caught in her throat. The woman stepped closer, snow catching on her lashes, her breath forming a cloud between them. "It's me," she said gently. "Julia." Natalie's eyes widened. The name struck like thunder inside her chest. Julia, her sister. A name she hadn't spoken aloud in over 30 years. For a moment, Natalie felt dizzy. She blinked. Once, twice, as if the snow had played a cruel trick. But Julia stood there, real, older, but unmistakably her. "I've been looking for you," Julia said, voice cracking with something between joy and regret. Natalie didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to move. Julia took a careful step forward, her gloved hand extended, fingers trembling. Natalie stared at the outstretched glove, snow gathering on its velvet surface. Her hands, stiff with cold and age, hovered just an inch away. Part of her wanted to pull back, to protect herself from whatever this meant, from the past that had returned like a ghost. But another part, buried deeper, reached forward. She slipped her fingers into Julia's palm, The warmth was immediate, not just physical, emotional, familiar, foreign, terrifying. Julia gave her hand a gentle squeeze, then guided her slowly toward the black SUV parked nearby. The windows glowed softly, heat visibly fogging the glass from within. Natalie hesitated before stepping inside. The door closed behind her with a muted thump, sealing them into a cocoon of silence and heat. The smell inside the car was haunting. Leather, jasmine perfume, and something faintly citrus. The same scent their mother used to keep in her sewing basket. Natalie's eyes fluttered shut for a moment. "You're freezing," Julia said, leaning forward to adjust the heat vents toward her sister's face. "I was walking," Natalie replied, voice hoarse. "Now you're not." They sat in silence as the car pulled away. Gliding over snow-slick roads, the city lights blurred by. It felt like driving through a memory. Natalie stole glances at Julia. She looked older, of course, silver hair framing a sharp face, cheeks hollowed just enough to betray the years. But there was still something fierce about her. Not angry, just alive. She had always been the strong one. The last time they were in a car together, they were teenagers, stealing their mother's keys, driving down back roads, shouting at each other over the radio. That was before the fight, before Julia left and never looked back. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," Natalie whispered. "I didn't think I'd find you," Julia replied, eyes still on the road. "But I did, and I found something else too." Natalie turned toward her, brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Julia reached down and pulled a thin binder from the space between the seats. She handed it over gently, like passing a newborn. Natalie opened it with cautious hands. Inside were copies of old documents, handwritten ledgers, land deeds, legal certificates. Familiar names jumped out: her parents, their address, old bank stamps. She blinked. "What is all this?" "Our parents' property," Julia said. "They hid it, all of it." Natalie stared harder. Her heart thudded in her chest. These were records of stocks, bonds, land in Colorado, shares in companies she'd never heard of. They built a life we never knew about. While we thought they were scraping by, they were hiding everything away. For decades. Natalie's voice came out thin. "Why? Why would they?" "To protect it," Julia said. "From taxes, from greedy relatives. From us, maybe." She gave a sad laugh. "But here's the thing, Natalie." She looked directly at her now. "You own half of it." Natalie's lips parted, but no sound came. "I went through the records with lawyers. The will, the real one, names you, not me. You were the heir. I was written out when I ran away. But they left it all to you." Natalie's hands began to tremble. She closed the binder. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, barely a whisper. "Because you're my sister," Julia said simply. "And because I want to change your life." Natalie turned away, her eyes stinging. She wasn't sure if it was the heat or the years of ice finally melting. "I don't know what a life like that even looks like anymore." Julia smiled softly. "That's okay. We'll figure it out." The car slowed in front of a building. Warm brick, soft lights, snow-covered ivy. Julia opened the door. "Come on, you need to sleep. We'll talk more in the morning." The morning came quietly, wrapped in pale light and the smell of cinnamon tea. Snow still fell outside in soft flakes, muffling the world. Natalie woke slowly, disoriented, warm, and cocooned beneath a heavy quilt. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory trickled back. Julia, the car, the binder full of strange, impossible documents. On the nightstand sat a silver tray, toast, steaming tea, and a single envelope. The wax seal gleamed faintly in the light. It was her mother's crest. The sight of it made Natalie's breath catch in her throat. Her fingers hovered above it, trembling. She remembered that seal from a lifetime ago, pressed into Christmas cards, wedding invitations, letters full of love that eventually stopped coming. It was the mark of everything she lost when her parents died and her sister disappeared. From the doorway came Julia's voice, soft but certain. "Open it." Natalie looked up. Julia leaned against the frame, coffee in hand, her eyes unreadable. "I found it in one of Mother's Bibles," Julia said, "hidden in a false back cover, alongside some other things I think you should see." Natalie's chest tightened. "A Bible?" Julia nodded. "Come downstairs, it's all there." The living room smelled of old wood and dust, and something older, like memory itself. On the table lay a Bible, its leather cracked, edges worn soft with time. It looked exactly like the one their mother used to read from every Sunday, her voice trembling over the words of Psalms as the two sisters played quietly at her feet. Julia opened it gently, flipping past delicate pages yellowed with age. Near the middle she stopped, between Psalms and Proverbs, and lifted something thin from the hollowed space between the binding and the cover. A smaller envelope, cream paper, the same familiar handwriting across the front. "For Natalie, when the snow falls again." Natalie's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes welled instantly. "How?" she whispered. "She knew I'd be here," Julia finished for her. Natalie's fingers shook as she slid a nail beneath the seal and cracked it open. Inside, folded 3 times, was a letter, handwritten in blue ink, slightly faded, but legible. She began to read aloud, her voice unsteady. "My dearest Natalie, if you are reading this, then the years have passed, and perhaps the world has grown unkind. Your father and I have hidden something, not out of greed, but to protect you and your sister from those who would take everything. There is land, and money, and company shares, assets we built quietly, waiting for the time when one of you might need them most. Julia was always brave, but you were kind. And in this world, kindness needs armor. So this is my gift to you. When the snow falls, remember, it means you've survived another season. Love always, Mother." Natalie's voice broke on the last line. The letter slipped from her hands onto the table. Julia reached for her, but Natalie waved her off, eyes wide and wet. "They left it for me," she said, disbelief thick in her tone. "After everything, they left it for me." Julia looked down at the Bible, then at her sister. "You were the heir, Natalie, not me." Natalie turned sharply. "What are you talking about?" Julia sighed and pulled a folder from her coat pocket. "The will, the real one. They changed it after I left home. I thought I was written out of their lives. Turns out I was right. But they left everything to you." Natalie sat back, stunned. All those years she'd felt forgotten, unwanted, the invisible daughter. And yet here, in her hands, was proof that her parents had never stopped thinking of her. That maybe somehow they had trusted her with something far greater than love. Her throat ached. "Why would they do that to you?" Julia's smile was small, tired. "Because I ran away. I wanted adventure. You stayed. You were their hope." Silence filled the room. Heavy, but not hostile. The kind of silence that only exists between sisters who've shared both blood and betrayal. Natalie traced her mother's handwriting one last time, then looked up. "What happens now?" Julia's eyes softened. "Now we begin claiming it all. You deserve it, Nat." Natalie shook her head slowly. "Deserve it?" Her lips trembled into a half smile. "I don't even know what that word means anymore." Julia placed a steady hand over hers. "Then it's time to learn." The first thing Julia did was take Natalie shopping, not for luxury, but for dignity. Warm shoes, a real coat, a tailored wool blazer that felt like armor. In the mirror, Natalie didn't see herself, not yet, but she saw someone she could eventually respect. Next came her hair, cut, softened, shaped. You have a regal face, the stylist said. Natalie almost laughed, but when the cape came off and the mirror reflected back a woman with strength in her eyes, she didn't argue. Therapy followed quietly. Natalie didn't like it, but she kept going. The first time Eliza asked, "Do you think your children loved you?" Natalie stared at the floor. "I don't know," she said. Then more quietly, "I don't think they saw me." Healing began slowly, not through dramatic moments, but in simple acts. Eating hot soup, folding new clothes, deleting old voicemails. And then one afternoon, she signed the documents. With one signature, Natalie became majority owner of a $200 million real estate company. She went to bed early that night, exhausted. At 2:11 a.m., her phone buzzed. A single message glowed on the screen. "Mom?" The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the snowy skyline, while polished suits filled the long mahogany table. Natalie stepped in wearing black wool. Silver hair swept into a low twist. No makeup, no smiles. She didn't need either. They assumed she was symbolic. A quiet, older woman inheriting things she didn't understand. A ceremonial presence, harmless. They were wrong. She sat, listened, waited. Then, when the room paused for her, she leaned forward and asked a question none of them were prepared for. By the end of the meeting, 2 projects were shut down. One executive quietly dismissed, and a new fund was greenlit, one that redirected profits into housing for elderly women. Natalie had arrived. Over the following weeks, she built her own team, hired advisors she trusted, taught herself everything they thought she couldn't grasp. Julia stood at her side, like a shadow, calm, loyal, and proud. Headlines started circulating. Mysterious woman becomes majority owner of Finch Properties. Elder heiress takes control. Natalie refused all interview requests. She had no interest in telling her story. Her silence said enough. One morning, as snow fell again outside her office window, a soft ping from her phone broke her focus. Message from Alex. "Mother, please, can we talk?" Natalie stared at the screen for several minutes. She didn't reply. She didn't delete it either. The next day, another came from her daughter. "We saw the article. We're proud of you. We were just lost before. Can we start over?" Start over? As if the years hadn't happened. As if holidays missed, illnesses ignored, birthdays forgotten were a simple misunderstanding. The third message was more desperate. "Mom, I'm in trouble. I need help. Please don't turn your back on me." Natalie locked her phone, but by the weekend they found her house. The gate buzzed twice. Natalie was in the sitting room, snowlight spilling across the floor. Julia stood at the window, peering out. "It's them," she said quietly. Natalie didn't move. 3 figures stood at the wrought iron gate, huddled in coats, eyes shifting toward the intercom. Her son, Alex, was thinner than she remembered. Grayer. His expensive coat didn't hide the desperation in his stance. Her daughter, Leanne, held a bouquet of wilted tulips. The youngest, James, stood slightly behind them, as if unsure whether he belonged here at all. They pressed the button. A voice came through. "Mom, please, it's us." Natalie didn't respond. They came back every day for a week, sometimes with gifts, sometimes with tears. Once with a lawyer. On the 4th day, they left handwritten notes. On the 5th, they brought childhood photos. Old toys, a torn recipe card in her handwriting. Natalie watched from the upstairs window. She felt nothing. Not rage, not triumph, just distance. Julia asked gently, "Do you want to speak to them?" Natalie shook her head. "They wanted a world without me. I let them have it." But then came the final message, this one, short, brutal. "I'm being investigated. I need help. You're the only one who can save me." No name, no warmth, just entitlement. That night, Natalie sat in her study, fingers resting on the letter her mother had once written her. Julia came in quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. "They think you owe them something?" she said. Natalie nodded. "They think I still belong to them." Julia sat beside her. "What are you going to do?" Natalie looked out at the snow. It was falling again, soft, thick, endless. "I'll see them once," she said. "Only once." The cafe Natalie chose was small, discreet, and unfamiliar, a quiet place in a neighborhood none of them had history in. She didn't want memories to walk in with them. She wanted clean walls, empty space. She arrived early, sat by the window, ordered chamomile tea. Julia waited outside, just in case. She didn't ask to come in. Natalie had made it clear. This was a solo closure. The door chimed once. Her children stepped in together, hesitant, cautious, too rehearsed. Alex led the way, his eyes bloodshot, his posture stiff. Leanne followed, her makeup smudged at the corners. James kept his head low, as if hoping the floor would open up and swallow him whole. They saw her and froze. Natalie didn't smile. She simply gestured to the seats across from her. The silence lasted long enough for the waitress to come, pour 3 waters, and leave without a word. Then Leanne spoke. "You look different." Natalie blinked once. "So do you." Alex cleared his throat. "We didn't come here to fight." Natalie said nothing. James whispered, "We just want to fix things." Natalie leaned forward, folding her hands gently. "You mean now that I have money?" The question hung in the air like smoke. No one answered. Alex began. He spoke of regrets, of mistakes, of stress and shame and missed opportunities. He said things like, "We didn't know how to reach you, and life got in the way." Leanne followed. She cried softly, talked about depression, therapy, guilt. "We were so young when Dad left," she said. "We didn't know how to keep the family together." Natalie listened, not because she was moved, but because it was polite. She stared at their faces and tried, truly tried, to feel something. But all she saw were adults who had let her disappear when she had needed them most. And now, when she had risen from the cold, they suddenly remembered her name. Finally, James spoke. "We know we hurt you, but you're still our mother." Natalie tilted her head. "Am I?" He looked confused. "Of course." She looked at each of them slowly, carefully, like strangers who had once borrowed her last name. Then she said it, softly, without rage. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" 3 faces shattered in different ways. Leanne gasped as if struck. Alex's jaw tightened into a mask of pride and panic. James whispered, "You don't mean that." "I do," Natalie said. "I meant it the moment you left me in silence for 6 years." Alex slammed his hand on the table. "You're being cruel." Natalie didn't flinch. "You left me in the dark," she said. "No birthdays, no calls, no care, just silence. You weren't busy. You were indifferent." Leanne begged, "But we're still family." Natalie gently reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope. "This is all I have left to give you." Inside was a letter, signed and notarized. It stated, in clear legal terms, that they had no claim, no ties, no financial or emotional hold on her life. "This is my final contact with you," it read. "I wish you peace. Natalie." She placed it on the table and stood. Alex stood too. "You're not our mother anymore." Natalie met his eyes. "Then we agree." She walked out into the snow. Julia was waiting across the street. Natalie didn't say a word, just took her sister's arm and kept walking. Natalie stood in her sunroom, bathed in morning light. The snow fell gently beyond the tall windows, blanketing the world in quiet white. But for once, it didn't feel suffocating. It felt still, peaceful. She didn't cry after the cafe. She didn't collapse or rage or second-guess herself. She simply went home, brewed tea, and sat with her sister. Together, they watched the fire crackle and said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The next morning, Natalie made a decision. She called Julia into the study and laid out a plan. Not a revenge, not a press campaign, not even a memoir. Just a place. A real place. "I want to use this house for something more than comfort," she said. "I want it to mean something." Together, they began converting parts of the estate, old ballrooms, unused wings, shuttered guest quarters, into something living, human, a community shelter, a sanctuary. It started with 3 beds, then a kitchen, then a counselor. Within 6 months, the mansion became the Rose House, a center for abandoned elders, single mothers, and women rebuilding their lives. Natalie didn't put her name on the signs. She didn't pose for photos. She simply showed up, every day, to sweep, to serve soup, to sit beside women who knew what it meant to be forgotten. The house was filled with quiet strength, women learning how to breathe again. One of them, a former teacher, ran poetry workshops. Another, a once homeless pianist, played soft jazz in the drawing room on Sundays. Natalie walked those halls like she had always belonged there, not as the owner. As a witness, she didn't talk about her past. She let the present speak louder. Then one night, just after closing, there was a knock at the side door. It was gentle, hesitant. Natalie opened it herself. A teenage girl stood in the snow, trembling. She held a worn canvas bag, soaked at the corners. Her hair was messy, her eyes hollow, but she stood upright, like someone who hadn't given up just yet. "Can I help you?" Natalie asked softly. The girl nodded, then reached into her coat and pulled out a damp envelope. On the front, Natalie's name was written in delicate cursive. "My name's Winter," she said. "My mom said if anything ever happened to her, I should find you." Natalie felt something shift inside her, something ancient and new at the same time. She took the envelope, holding Winter's gaze for a long moment. Then she opened the door wider. "Come in," she said. "It's warm inside." Winter sat at Natalie's kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a warm mug of tea. 16, guarded, exhausted. Her presence filled the room like a ghost of someone Natalie once was. "My mom said if anything happened to her, I should find you," she said quietly. Her mother, Angela Monroe, had lived down the street from Natalie years ago. A kind face, a gentle word. Natalie hadn't known she remembered her, let alone trusted her with something so sacred. The envelope Winter brought bore their mother's old crest. Inside was a simple letter. "If I'm gone, please care for Winter the way the world never cared for us. No demands, no drama, just a quiet ask." Natalie looked at Winter. "There's a room upstairs. It's warm. It's yours if you want it." Winter blinked, confused. "Why?" Natalie answered simply, "Because I know what it's like to need someone, and have no one." Winter stayed, cautiously. She ate little, spoke less, but always watched. Natalie gave her space, patience, and silence. Day by day, Winter opened. Poetry, photography, quiet grief. She never cried, but sometimes, late at night, she whispered, "I don't know how to stop feeling cold." Natalie only said, "Then stay near the fire. That's why we build them." The next morning, the news flashed across the TV. Breaking: Alex Hayes arrested in $30 million tech fraud scandal. Winter turned to her. Natalie's voice didn't waver. "He's just someone I used to know." Winter settled in like a cautious animal, sleeping with the light on, eating in small bites, always watching the door. Natalie never pressed. She offered safety, routine, and soft warmth. Gradually, Winter responded, folding laundry beside her, reading quietly, shadowing her around the Rose House. When journalists got wind of Natalie's mysterious young guest, headlines speculated wildly. "Heiress adopts runaway?" Natalie issued one short statement. She's family. Then came the storm. And the news. Natalie's son, Alex, arrested for embezzlement and securities fraud. Her daughter, Leanne, appeared on a podcast, crying into a microphone. Mom emotionally abandoned us. That's why we failed. Natalie didn't blink. Later that night, Winter found a small package on the doorstep. Inside, a USB drive and a note in sharp handwriting. Let's destroy her. L. Natalie stood by the fire, holding the drive. She didn't tremble. She didn't rage. She simply dropped it into the flames. Winter, standing behind her, asked, "Do they still think they can hurt you?" Natalie stared into the fire. Let them try. The video from the USB drive was short. Leanne, furious, eyes red, voice shaking. She's not who she pretends to be. She left us. She owes us. Natalie didn't flinch. She simply fed the USB into the flames, like all the other pieces of her old life she'd burned. That night, she met with her attorney. I want everything severed, she said. Legally, financially, permanently. She updated her will. Everything, her estate, business shares, the Rose House, would go to Winter and the foundation. Her children would receive nothing. Later, while Winter was cleaning the attic, she found an old journal, faded and weathered, wrapped in a silk ribbon. Inside were entries from Natalie's childhood. One page stopped her cold. Clara, born 1952, taken. Never returned? Winter brought it down quietly. Who's Clara? Natalie's hand froze over her tea. Julia answered from the doorway. Our sister. Natalie stared at the journal. Find her? She said. We find Clara. Maine was gray, quiet, and covered in snow. Natalie, Julia, and Winter arrived at a modest house near the coast. An older woman opened the door. Stern eyes, familiar jawline. Clara? Natalie asked. The woman didn't answer. She looked at their faces for a long moment, then slowly stepped aside. Inside, over tea and cautious glances, truth surfaced. Clara had been given up at birth, adopted by another family before the sisters were born. She knew none of them, only that something was missing her whole life. Natalie gave her the journal. We've lived separate lives long enough, she said. If you want to know who we are, come home. Clara didn't cry, but her voice cracked when she asked, Why now? Natalie reached across the table, took her hand gently. Because now, I finally know who I am, Clara whispered. Will you stay? Natalie replied without hesitation. I'm home now. Back in the city, Natalie received one last request from her children. Please, one meeting. She agreed, but on her terms. They met in a quiet cafe. No cameras, no lawyers, just truth. Alex looked worn. Leanne was still defensive. James couldn't meet her eyes. They begged, rationalized, blamed, childhood, pressure, divorce. They wanted forgiveness and access. Natalie listened without emotion. Then she said softly, You left me alone in the dark. You didn't need me then. I don't need you now. She handed them an envelope. Inside, This is my final contact with you. I wish you peace. Natalie. She stood to leave. You're not our mother anymore, Alex said bitterly. Natalie paused at the door. Exactly. She stepped into the snow. Behind her, the cafe door shut with quiet finality. At home, Natalie removed the last relic of her past, her wedding ring. Not from grief, but from clarity. I don't owe them anything, not even memory, she told Julia. She finalized the paperwork. Her children's names struck from the will. Winter, Clara, Julia, and the Rose House were now her only legacy. Publishers called. Producers offered money. She declined them all. I didn't build this to be known, she said. I built it to last. One evening, Winter looked up from a book. Do you ever feel guilty? Natalie met her eyes, calm and steady. No. I feel free. The first snow of the season began to fall outside. Inside, the fireplace crackled, and Natalie didn't look back. 1 year to the day after she nearly froze alone on a forgotten sidewalk, Natalie stood in the garden of the Rose House, surrounded not by the cold, but by the warmth of lives she helped rebuild. Snow drifted down like blessings. Lanterns glowed from the trees, swinging gently in the wind. Around her, volunteers, residents, friends, and new family moved softly among fire pits and benches. The old estate was alive in ways no one could have imagined. A house once meant for silence, now full of stories. Natalie wore a deep crimson coat, the same shade Julia wore the night she found her. Her silver hair was pulled back. Her posture was regal, not proud, just sure of herself in a way that came from surviving. Winter stood beside her, holding a note card with trembling hands. When she stepped forward, the hush that fell was sacred. "This place," Winter began, "isn't just a shelter. It's a home built from someone who was once abandoned and who chose to build something better instead of burning everything down. I came here cold, afraid, and invisible." She didn't ask who I was. She just opened the door. Winter paused, looking at Natalie. "Thank you for being the fire when I had nothing but frost." The crowd clapped, quiet and emotional. Then Julia stepped up, holding a letter. "Clara wrote this," she said. "She couldn't be here, but she wanted her voice heard. To my sisters, I didn't know you, but now I do. And knowing you has given me back something I thought was lost forever. Belonging. Thank you for finding me. And for letting me come home." Clara tears slid down Julia's face. Natalie walked over and wrapped her arms around her. They stood there, two sisters bound not by blood, but by rebuilding everything they were never given. Later, as the music began to rise and people shared food and laughter, Natalie stepped away from the lights. She walked through the side gate into the untouched snow just beyond the garden. She looked up. Snowflakes danced through the air, catching on her lashes, her coat, her hair. She closed her eyes. She could still hear them, the voices of women finding their strength, the crackle of fires, the soft music of healing. And yet, out here in the quiet, she found something even greater. Peace. Not just freedom from others, but freedom from needing to be seen by them again. She whispered, almost to the snow itself, "They abandoned me to the cold, but I didn't freeze. I learned how to build fire." A gust of wind swept the lanterns behind her. She turned back toward the garden and stepped into the warmth.